Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Yes, my friends, conservative, not bitter indeed. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this Friday. Time flies when you're having fun. Speaking of fun, I'll mention this. This won't affect the program, but I'm actually going to take a day trip. This might sound crazy to some of you. It sounds borderline crazy to me, taking a little day trip with my son tomorrow. My son is just turned 16 a couple of weeks ago and wants to be a pilot. In fact, earlier this week, he visited with one of the local, flight training schools. He's actually a pretty good artist too, and he draws these airplanes, and these companies have reached out to him. They repost his stuff on Instagram and whatever else. Anyway, this flight school saw his artwork. I think I don't know if they posted it. They want to do thank you cards with his artwork or some such thing. Anyway, he, as a kind of a thank you, an appreciation, they brought him up and gave him a tour of their training facilities and their school and so forth. But my son's into flying, and so tomorrow we're going to take a day trip to go down to Austin, Texas, and just spend the day together. He just likes to fly, so for him it's two flight there and a flight back. But anyway, that's what I'm doing. That won't affect our schedule here. I'll be back tomorrow, so Monday will be fine. But I want to today. I got an email from a listener that I want to share. You know, I need to do better at this, and I've said this before, but I got an email from a listener, and by the way, if you want to email me, I mention this on the program from time to time. It's todd@toddhuffshow.com. I read the emails. I do my best to respond. And every once in a while, we'll talk about one of them on here. It's just, there's so many things vying for my attention when we're looking at the news of the day. I don't always get to them. In fact, the best way for me to get to it is to talk about it at the beginning of the program, and that's what I'm going to do here today. I want to talk about an email I got about Jeffrey Epstein, Trump, everything else. We'll get into that as the program unfolds. Before I do that, my friends, let me remind you, MyPillow. Mike Lindell and MyPillow want to say thank you. They have said thank you for supporting them, partnering with them, purchasing products from them, pillows, slippers, towels, sheets, dog beds, whatever you've purchased. They appreciate your business. I do, as well, as they are a partner of this program. They've got a deal on their Percale bed sheets now that is as low as $24.98. These are breathable sheets that have a cool and a crisp feel. If you're like me at all, you do not like being hot at night. These sheets are designed to help combat that. They also have deep pockets, so they'll fit over any thickness of a mattress. Also, for a limited time, when you place an order with MyPillow that's $100 or more, you're going to get $100 in free digital gifts. That's available for you as well. All you have to do is go to MyPillow.com, promo code Todd. Promo code Todd's going to get you those special price for the Percale bed sheets. It'll get you discounts on other products as well. MyPillow.com, promo code Todd. All right, so let's start here. With an email I got. And anytime I get an email, I want to acknowledge who it's from to a point. I want to protect, a little bit of confidentiality. I'm not here to, I'm here to acknowledge who it's from without getting into the personal aspects of this. But this is from Matt. And Matt writes me and says this. Says, "Good morning, sir. I'm emailing you about Jeffrey Epstein." Now, if you listen to this program for any length of time, that I say, if I tell you that you can email me, I'll say My friends make sure that it includes the appropriate amounts of adoration and praise. And I also say that it's slightly more than you might expect. It's like 10 to 15% more adoration and praise for your host than you might realize. Now, that's all tongue-in-cheek, of course. Kidding, not kidding stuff. So I would say, Matt, you did, you acknowledged, sir, that's good. Could do a little bit better on the adoration and praise. Anyway, I'm kidding. I'm emailing you about it, Jeffrey Epstein. I listen to you in the morning on Freedom 95. That's, of course, our flagship station here in Indianapolis. And he says he listens to Glenn Beck, too. I'm a local truck driver here in Indianapolis, so I listen to a lot of talk radio working 12-hour days. When I get off from work, I watch the Doug in Exile. I don't know what that is. That's not a knock. I just don't know what that is. While the wife or I cook dinner. It all depends on who's got what going on. Don't take me wrong, but he and his team also have been looking into Jeffrey Epstein. Well, yesterday, I guess this is Doug in Exile, found something that everyone needs to hear. Nobody has been interviewing Alan Dershowitz, but one news outlet. So I have this soundbite. I think I even had it yesterday. I just didn't get to it because we didn't talk about Jeffrey Epstein yesterday. Is that right? I sometimes get my days confused here. But Alan was Jeffrey's lawyer, if you remember. Talking about Alan Dershowitz. Well, in this interview, Alan said he's seen the Black Book and all the names in it. I'll play this clip for you in just a moment. By the way, Matt then writes, he also said a New York federal judge has it under lock and key. There is an investigation going on because of all the names in it. Also, the New York Times said the same thing. Alan can't even say one name, even in the book, so let's stop. Here's his point. Here's what he wants me to hear. And Matt, I'm going to hear you out here. So let's stop giving Trump and his team a hard time. He's more focused on Texas and 2 wars going on. I love to listen to all 3 of you. That's a nice little adoration and praise there at the end. I like what you did with that, Matt, because you're going to drop a line here on me that you're not happy with me. You say, but please, in all caps, this is like reading a Trump tweet, but please stop helping out the Democrats by adding fuel to Jeffrey Epstein's book. Thank you, Matt. Matt, first of all, thanks for writing in. I appreciate it very much. Thoughts on this? First, I don't entirely disagree with what you're saying here, but let's also focus in on what this issue is really about. So I agree in general that obviously the left, the Democrats, the media, the 7 pillars of propaganda, they're all interested in taking down Trump. I've coined a phrase on this program for those of you who are fans of Seinfeld, of which I am one. Seinfeld had a neighbor in his building named Newman, who was his arch nemesis. Newman hated Seinfeld. Seinfeld hated Newman. And so there was an opportunity one time for Newman to get relocated to the island of Hawaii. Newman worked for the U.S. Postal Service. By the way, if you want to know why I think government is, one of the reasons I think government is so inefficient and just incapable of walking and talking, chewing gum at the same time. Watch Newman. Newman is actually a pretty good representation of how the federal government typically works. And he works for the U.S. Postal Service. Listen, I know I probably have people out there who are employed by the U.S. Postal Service. And individually, there could be great workers. And I'm not saying you're Newman. I might say it in a joking way just to kind of, have fun with you. But, in fact, if my buddies, I talked to one of my good buddies yesterday, if my buddy worked for the U.S. Postal Service, you better bet I would refer to him as Postal Employee Newman. But that's another story for another day. So, but this this teamwork, they came together, Seinfeld and his arch nemesis, and Jerry told him, he said, Newman, I will do whatever it takes, as long as it takes me, so long as it takes you away from me. So I will work with you to get your dreams fulfilled if it means I don't have to see you again. I don't have to put up with you again. This is how the media, this is how the Democrat Party, the 7 pillars of propaganda deal with Trump. I've been through this. I call this the Seinfeld-Newman strategy. The media, the Democrats, the leftists, they will do whatever it takes as long as it takes them, so long as it takes Trump out of office. Now, before the election, it was to prevent him from having a second term. Now that he's in office, it's to prevent him from implementing his agenda. Maybe very soon, the efforts, especially if they win the House in the midterms, they've already tried to start impeachment proceedings a couple of times. This is legitimately what they're going to do. There's no mistake about it. So I am sympathetic here to your argument that says, hey, we don't need to give them a helping hand here. And in general, I see that point. I talk about that on a regular basis. But let me pause. And this might rub some of you slightly the wrong way. But I have told you on this program, my objective is not to further the cause of the Republican Party. My objective is not even to further the cause of the MAGA movement. Now, oftentimes, because the Republican Party on the national scene is the only party, even with all of the mess that comes with the Republican Party, it's the only entity, the only party, the only group of people in the political world that have enough power to get anything done that we actually have some level of influence in. Now, we can debate how much that is, whether it's 5% or 80% or 20%, whatever it is. But we have 0% in the Democrat Party. And then there's other parties where we might have more power within a particular party. Like maybe even with Elon Musk's party, there would be statistically a higher conservative percentage, but it doesn't matter if you have 100% of something that has no impact nationally. And that's my problem with Elon Musk's party. Even though I would say if anybody can pull it off, it might be Elon, and it might be in this era of social media and the internet where people can bypass the traditional gatekeepers of political power. But it's still going to be an incredibly difficult thing, and it's still going to split Republican votes or conservative votes, some people who stick around for the Republican Party and so whatever. But again, I don't want to go down that too far. I'm just simply acknowledging I understand where you're coming from here. And I don't want to get in the way of the things that need to happen. But let me say this. It's tragic what happened in Texas. I've spent a lot of time talking about Texas. I've spent a lot of time talking about the people talking about Texas and some of the reprehensible, evil things that have been said about these families who have lost children. Despicable things for a human being to say about another person, predicated based upon their race, based upon who they voted for. There have been some scumbags out there saying some reprehensible and absolutely evil, despicable things. And it's a problem. It's a problem. Now, is it a federal government problem? Is it a state problem? Listen, there might be some things that, as it pertains to the National Weather Service, that could be, under the purview of the federal government. But it appears that wasn't the problem here. It appears that it was a natural disaster. Some people say, well, that was climate change, Todd, and this is evidence that climate change is destructive. That's not how I see this at all. This was a natural disaster that was unprecedented, but a natural disaster that certainly there have been other disasters similar, just not with the volume of water that hit so quickly in this particular area. So, but the point is to say there's a lot of people that could bear responsibility here, from governments to people who choose where to build things to just something happening that none of us could have predicted. I don't know where the lines are drawn, but it's not going to work for me to say that Trump being focused on Texas or even the two wars, what's happening with Iran and the Middle East, what's happening with Ukraine and Russia. It's forgive me for saying that that's not enough. A president has to learn to deal with lots of things during his time as president. And it's absolutely unacceptable for this to be ignored. Trump is, I would say, of all the time, Trump has been in the public eye politically. Now, he's been in the public eye my whole life, but politically, for the past 10 years now, it's been roughly almost 10 years to the day. In fact, do you know this weekend, so July 13th, this weekend marks the 1 year, I don't want to say anniversary, but the 1 year mark of the attempted assassination on President Trump when he was shot in the ear in Butler, Pennsylvania. That was July, I believe it was July 13th of 2024. But this is not enough to say that you can't ask these questions. Of course these questions can be answered, or asked, I should say, and they should be answered as well. Let us remember what is at stake here. This is something that is at its core some wicked and reprehensible stuff. Jeffrey Epstein, sex trafficking of minors, that involves people who are powerful, that are in government, that are in, other positions of prominence and power. And this is absolutely legitimate for him to be asked about this, especially given some of the things that the administration said. Trump said some things about Epstein in the past as well, but Pam Bondi in particular talking about having the list on her desk. I get this. This is complicated. You can't just release a list that implicates people. There could be legalities, lawsuits, all sorts of things that you could have to contend with. You also have the pressures of people who want to keep this private. That's what people really don't like. I think people are understandable to a point about some of the legal ramifications and concerns and so forth. You cannot insinuate that people on a list are all guilty of these absolutely heinous and wicked crimes when that is just a flight log. Now, the flight log could be absolutely incriminating, or it could be that, you flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane for some other purpose. Now, you could say, why are you flying with Jeffrey Epstein? I don't know. I mean, maybe some folks didn't know what he was up to. Todd, they got to be aware. I don't know. It's easy to say in 2025, knowing what we know today, that everybody who ever shook Jeffrey Epstein's hand knew that he was a creep, pedophile loser. But I don't know that that's really the way that in fact, I know that that's not the way that would work. Every person who had their picture taken with him didn't know he was the evil, wicked person doing these wicked things. Now, some did. I got more to say about this. I got the Alan Dershowitz soundbite, which Matt referenced in his email here to get to in a moment. But, my friends, let me tell you that we have relaunched something that we did here 6 years ago. Before I started this show, we had a business. It was called Huff Promotional Strategies at first. We rebranded it as Mr. Brandit sometime later. I sold that business in 2019. Had a 6-year non-compete. I didn't forget about it, but I just never really thought I'd get back into the business. But here over the past year or so, there's been some things that have changed, and I thought, we could actually do this again. We can add this as a division of what we do when we help our customers promote their brand and so forth, and when we advertise and that sort of thing on the program. And so we relaunched promotional products company called Red, White, and Brand. You can check out the website, redwhiteandbrand.com. Promo code Todd will save you 10% on a purchase you make there, your first purchase. And if you order online, you will get free shipping to boot. Check it out, redwhiteandbrand.com. Your logo on almost anything, my friends. redwhiteandbrand.com, promo code Todd. All right, so that being said, let's get back to Matt's email, and let me reiterate or pick up where I left off, which is basically saying, look, being president means you got to manage a lot of things at once. Being president means that you have to deal with questions about things that your Department of Justice deals with. These are legitimate questions. Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, again, I went through it. I don't want to go through it all today because of the sake of time, but I went through it earlier this week in a previous episode. Oz, I don't remember what day that was. Do you know? We talked about Epstein. You're looking? Earlier this week, I don't know. But you can go back to the website and you can get the full kind of summary of Jeffrey Epstein, what's going on, all that sort of stuff. Wednesday? So it was Wednesday, 2 days ago. So, you got to deal with multiple problems. And this is a big problem because what are we ultimately saying here? We are saying that children have been victimized in a systematic, grotesque, and evil way. And that the people who are in positions of power in this country, maybe walking the halls of Congress, maybe walking the halls of our administrative state, maybe walking the halls of the Supreme Court, maybe the people who are running the political parties. We don't know, but these people, some of them, it is believed or it is wondered if they were a part of this. They were a part of this. And what does this mean? Were they getting on Jeffrey Epstein's jet or going to Jeffrey Epstein's parties and participating in some really heinous, disgusting acts with innocent children? Now, Matt says that by talking about this, I'm actually giving Democrats fuel to run off of. And I acknowledge that could be the case to a point. But if my mission here is to help others hear and receive truth, my friends, as it is important that we get to the bottom of this. This is not a victimless crime. This is a crime. Jeffrey Epstein had been convicted, or he took a plea deal at the state level. He had been charged federally. Ghislaine, however I say that, Maxwell, she is convicted. And that's a conspiracy charge. I went through and explained to you. I was on a jury where there was a conspiracy charge between, two people who ended up killing, I believe, a 5-year-old boy. Her son, and it's the son, the boyfriend was involved, I believe, as well. I shared that story. That's a personal story. And conspiracy means that people work together for this. So if they're working together, there's other people involved. Got to take a break, pick up this conversation on the other side of the timeout, my friends. Sit tight. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Talking here about Jeffrey Epstein. Talk about an email I got from a listener. And Matt, I appreciate the email. Matt thinks I should lighten up on Trump. I don't think so, and I don't think I'm being that hard on him. I'm just saying that there's a lot of questions here that deserve answers, and it's not enough to say, I've got other important priorities here. Or as Trump said, why are we still talking about this creep? We're talking about this creep because justice has not been served. Now, anytime something like this comes up, you've got people who say, look, Trump's playing chess, everybody else is playing checkers, Trump is trying to set somebody up, waiting on when to release this, whatever. Listen, maybe, I don't know. But I will say this, from the tone of that meeting, that press conference, it seemed to me that Trump didn't want to talk about this. And some people will then say that's because he's on the list, Todd. I don't believe he's on the list. I believe if he's on the list, and by the way, that's another term that could be, Trump might be on the list as far as people who have been on an airplane with Jeffrey Epstein. It's quite another to say that Trump was doing something nefarious, and that's part of the problem of releasing this list. If you just release a flight log, you could be insinuating that everybody is on said flight log is guilty of a crime. People may not be guilty of a crime. In fact, I would say that a lot of them wouldn't be. So that might be some of the, of course, opposition here. And that's reasonable to my mind. Why would you just release that? It's insinuating, as Is the government then responsible for ruining the people's lives who are on there that didn't do anything wrong besides take an airplane ride with Jeffrey Epstein? Some people would say, well, that's damning enough. I would say that's a stretch. I mean, that is absolutely a stretch, especially the way that things work in some of these circles. So to give you some background, and Matt referenced this in his email, I'm going to play this as well. Alan Dershowitz is on with Sean Spicer on Sean Spicer's program, and he talks about this. Dershowitz talks about this very thing, about these documents, about he himself was implicated. And so he was able to see, or Alan Dershowitz was able to see the list because he was on the list, and the implication was he was doing other evil, wicked, nefarious acts, sexually exploiting children, all that sort of stuff. He defended himself from this. But he can't talk about it. The only reason he saw the list was because, the flight log was because he was defending himself. And when you're, facing legal charges, there's this process called discovery where the evidence has to be presented. The evidence the state has to be presented so that the defense knows what charges and evidence exists against them so that they can formulate a defense. And so it was through that process that Dershowitz was able to see this list, or at least a portion of it, the portion where he was. He says he saw a lot of names on there, a lot of powerful names. And he says, look, just because you're on this list doesn't mean that you did anything wrong, but that's the implication. That's where you get into the area that this is problematic. Dershowitz says release everything, allow people to, release the evidence that shows that people weren't, there's no evidence that they did anything wrong. They're just on the flight. But this has a feeling, because it's so heinous, it has the feeling of something that could turn into something like a witch trial. If you're on the list, you're automatically guilty. And in some people's minds, that's the case. But again, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. They certainly could be the biggest scumbags on the planet, and that could be evidence that they were doing evil and heinous things and participating in this absolute depravity. But it doesn't mean that in and of itself. Just to give you an explanation, let's let Dershowitz, this is a couple minutes, but Spicer and Dershowitz are talking about this very thing, and Matt references this in his email, so I'll play it here as well. This is Alan Dershowitz on with Sean Spicer. This posted a couple of days ago. I've pulled it from X. Here you go. You can listen to this exchange. Here we go again. I tell you what, folks. Let me do this again. Let me back it up. Dershowitz on.
This is not an opinion. This is a fact.
Spicer.
I have seen. Remember, I was accused falsely, and they have seen. And ultimately, I was completely cleared. The woman admitted that she may have mistook me for somebody else and withdrew all of her lawsuits. And so from day one, from the day I was accused, I said I want every document out because I knew every document would prove I was innocent. So let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed. And they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them. But I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them. And that's wrong.
Okay. So that's what he's saying. He said, look, I've had to defend myself. Somebody made allegations against me. They have since withdrawn all their lawsuits and so forth. They realized that they thought somebody was me, but it wasn't me. And I've got the evidence to prove it. I actually want this information out there that exonerates me, that shows that I'm not guilty, says Dershowitz. But he says, I know for a fact they're protecting some of these documents because they don't want to give, the government, the people who have access to this flight log, basically. We don't want this to be known, or we don't want to put this out there and for people to automatically assume that there's something else here when quite literally some of these folks, all we know is that they flew on a plane with Jeffrey Epstein. And Dershowitz says, look, I'm not I'm not guilty of this, and there's others as well. But there may be people on this list, of course, who were doing some of these wicked and atrocious things. Again, if they weren't, who were Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell? Who were they sending these young girls to? Who were they conspiring? They were conspiring amongst themselves to provide services, these young innocent girls, to these pervs. They were providing those services to somebody. Who were they providing them to? This is a legitimate question. This is why this shouldn't just be swept under the rug or ignored. But the other side of this is, well, everybody on the flight log doesn't necessarily mean that they're guilty of this, like Dershowitz. So the conversation continues.
Just out of curiosity, without names, are these politicians, business leaders, both?
They're everything. And let me tell you, a lot of them are, at least one of them is somebody who was accused. Others are accusers. And the judges have said, if somebody calls themselves a victim, we're not going to give any information about them. But they may not be victims. They may be perpetrators. So we don't have information about false accusers. And we know there have been many false accusers who have accused innocent people for money. And those records are being deliberately, willfully suppressed. And they shouldn't be suppressed. If the accusation is allowed out, so should the material that diminishes the credibility of the accuser. We want total transparency on this. Every single document, no redaction. That's what I've said from day one. I waive any of my rights of privacy. Anything there is about me, I'm happy because it will be exculpatory, because I know I haven't touched a woman other than my wife from the day I met Jeffrey Epstein. I don't even hug people, but I was falsely accused and I was able to prove it. And I was able to prove it through documents. And I want other people to be able to disprove false accusations through documents. But these documents are being suppressed and withheld.
You can tell from listening to that this becomes complicated. And you can also tell that there are examples, or there are, I guess, people that can manipulate the system. They can say, look, maybe they find out their names on the flight log. They say, well, I was a victim. Now suddenly their name is redacted from the flight logs because now they're a victim status, and they don't have to really, again, I'm not trying to come down on people who are legitimately victims, but you can see how this could be manipulated. Say, I don't want my name to be known, so I'm going to say I was a victim. Now my name's redacted, put someone else on the defense. I don't have to acknowledge anything about the charges, any specifics. I can just say I'm the victim, this person did it, now they're guilty until proven. And I said, this is a mess, right? It's quick to see, or easy to see, that this turns into a mess. So more to say about this, but friends, think about this for just a moment. Our investments are like seeds that we plant. They grow, they multiply, but are they bearing the kind of fruit that we want? At 48 Financial, they believe our money should reflect our values. They specialize in wealth management and biblically responsible investing, screening out companies that do not align with our faith. It's all part of what they call the purpose-centered financial planning. Helps you live a life of meaning and purpose. Want to see if your investments align with your values? It's easy to do. All you have to do is go to 48financial.com/Todd. I took this assessment. You can as well. It's very painless. It's quick and easy, and it will help you determine if your investments are in alignment with your values. 48financial.com/Todd. 48 Financial, my friends, they're here to help, here to worry, I should say, about your money so you don't have to. Quick timeout, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friend. Last segment of the week, talking about an email I got from Matt. And Matt, I do sincerely appreciate the email. See where you're coming from on a couple of these things, but I don't see it exactly the same way that you do, because this is heinous and we need justice. My friends, I'll finish wrapping up some thoughts about this before the end of the program here. But before I do that, let me mention to you, those of you who have businesses, those of you who work in marketing for a business, if you are looking for, well, a partnership with a program like this that can get you in front of what I consider to be the coolest audience out there, then I'm here to help you do that. We've got a few openings left. We only have a couple for some advertising packages, and I just wanted to let you know that. I mentioned this once or twice this week. I want to mention it because we don't have much availability left, and I just want to give you the chance to take advantage of this if you think it might make sense for your business. If it does, just text advertise to 317-210-2830, or you can email todd@toddhuffshow.com, and you can just put advertise there as well. Either way, we'll get you taken care of. These packages aren't going to be available for much longer. So if you're interested or just want to have a conversation, text advertise to 317-210-2830, or the same to an email, todd@toddhuffshow.com. Just say advertise and we will help take care of you. All right. So all of that being said, my friends, at the core of the problem with Jeffrey Epstein, at the core of this problem, is that people do not believe that the government is going after the folks that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were basically prostituting these girls out to. I don't know how else to say this. And so we know that they were providing these quote-unquote services, this depravity, to people. And there doesn't seem to be any interest in pursuing the people who were on the other side of this transaction. And so that's when people get upset. So I would say this, and I know it's easy to say release the list, the flight log or whatever, and maybe that's what needs to be done. I don't know. But at bare minimum, maybe there's a reason they can't release the flight log. I mean, maybe it really did get deleted. I don't know. I put nothing past these folks. People could have gotten rid of the evidence. I don't know. Maybe that's not possible. I don't have enough knowledge to say. But I do know this. What I do know is that ultimately what people like me want is for there to be justice for these girls. We don't want a two-tiered system of justice. We don't want the political power, the politically powerful, the wealthy, the people who are on the inside or whatever to be basically given a free pass here. We want justice to be served for these young, these victims. Justice needs to be served. We should not turn a blind eye towards this depravity, no matter who is in the White House. I'm certain that it's more complicated than I fully grasp, but I also understand on another level, this is simple. Heinous crimes have been committed. People need to be held accountable. And more than anything, we just need to see something. Even if it's not, maybe it cannot be the flight log. And I might be a minority voice saying this. But even if it can't be the flight log, if there is something to say, look, we can't give you that because of all these implications and we could get sued and all this other stuff. But what we can do is tell you that we're going after these people who are, well, there's evidence against, who are doing these wicked things. And then to update us on that. Kind of like what's happening with the deportations right now. Here's what we're doing with deportations. ICE is going after criminal illegal aliens, people who have not behaved well, people who are a risk, a threat. We can deport any of them, as I've gone through. Anyone who's here illegally, we can deport them. But we're starting with the ones who are the most heinous. We'll give you the biggest threat, the ones who are gang members, the ones who have been charged with violence, arrested, all this kind of stuff. That's where we're starting, right? And they've given updates on this. I feel like we see this happening. We see evidence of this. In fact, there was evidence of people out there, they're getting violent, openly violent with ICE. In fact, there were shootings at a group of several people, close to 10 if I'm not mistaken, were targeting ICE agents, trying to shoot them. Somewhere, was it in McAllen? It was in Texas, I believe. This is becoming justifiable to these lunatics, at least in their minds. Of course, it's absolute abject evil. But nonetheless, if we could see some sort of evidence, because the problem is when this has been talked about, Jeffrey Epstein, and then you look at the the rabbit hole you can go down. And when you look at, the depths of this depravity and who's involved, and I mean, there's all sorts of implications and rabbit holes and beliefs, and this is as bad as it gets, my friends. This is wicked, evil stuff. The Bible says it's better for someone to have a millstone hung around his neck and thrown into a sea than to harm one of these innocent young children. And that's what's happened here. That's what's happened here. We've had people who have harmed children who have not been held accountable, who have not been brought to justice. If you can't show us the flight logs, okay, but don't just say it's over and done with. That's where people really have the problem. You'll get pushback from people who are going to say, look, I want to see the flight logs. But if you can at least show them that you're working for justice, that might suffice. I got to go, though, friends. SDG.